Welcome to another episode of the CarryTrainer Higher Line podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Higher Line podcast. We've got our friend Michael Shorten on today. This is going to be a good one. We're going to talk about how you can affect change in local government. We're going to talk about comedy specials. We're going to talk about Mike's background a little bit and being a good citizen. Welcome.
Sounds good. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So you and I met 7, 8, 9 years ago and eventually ended up co-vice chairman of the local Republican Party.
Well, we started out, we were on kind of opposite sides of a political race.
Yeah, there was like, you were supporting the candidates I hated.
Yes.
And we beat you really badly.
To be fair, I didn't do a lot. All I did was I endorsed the guy that I thought was the right guy at the time. In retrospect, it was the wrong guy.
Yeah, whatever.
And I'm glad that your side won.
Yeah, that's always funny. That's the fun thing about politics and like Drew, who's behind the cameras right now, that's how all of us met, was at that time working together.
Yes, that's right.
And we'll talk about it today. Now you are yourself stepping into the ring, which you've done before.
I'm stepping back in.
Yeah,
that's
back
correct.
in.
Yeah.
So you're running for county board in
McHenry County District 3. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd served previously as a trustee in Nunda Township, and that ended in 2017.
What's a trustee do in a township?
So I'm going to try and give you the short answer.
Please.
The short answer is not much. No, it's true.
So you guys listening, well, you don't get paid to do that job.
Trustee?
Yeah.
Yeah, you get paid. It's
a little bit, like $5,000 a year or something.
It's not even that much.
Okay.
I think it was $1,400.
Okay, it's enough to like cover your fuel to drive back and forth to the meetings.
Yeah,
and the beer after to make you wash away the pain.
That's pretty much it. I mean, no, really, the only power that we really had was relative to taxes, which were important, but township taxes are not a huge amount in Illinois, the property tax bill. Now, that said, I spent a lot of time, banging on the table and trying to get, it was all Republican board. The way that I think is very detail orientated. So I'm elected in on a new slate of the board at that time. The supervisor was new, who's a member of the board. There were 1 or 2 new board members, and the new supervisor wanted to put through a 10% increase in taxes. And I sat at this meeting, and I remember it very vividly because it was a small amount of money. And
to the taxpayer.
Yeah, to the taxpayer. I mean, probably like a couple bucks.
So when we talk about townships, a lot of people in the U.S., not everybody has townships that assess taxes. Illinois is one of the number one tax states with taxing bodies in the country.
Absolutely.
And we are township heavy, which you were part of an initiative to.
Yeah, so I got involved in an initiative back in 2015 that was Township Consolidation. So in McHenry County right now, I think we have 17 townships. And an idea was brought to me. This wasn't something that I started, but they brought it to me and said, hey, there's a law that exists on the book that says if the county board approves a plan, it goes to a referendum to the voters. The voters can vote to consolidate townships. So you could take 17 and bring it down to 16 or 15 or 12 or 8 or whatever.
Or abolish them and the county would absorb the road maintenance.
Well, in that particular initiative, there was no abolishment.
Okay.
It was strictly a consolidation. So if you had one township here, and it's about 6 square miles and 6 square miles here, the functioning parts of the township are supervisor, which doles out general assistance funds, which is very small dollar amounts to people that are on the fringes and need help. You have the highway commissioner, which they're in charge of roads in the township, and depending on the township, you might have some that are in charge of 100 miles, some that are in charge of 50. And then you have the assessor in Illinois with the property tax structure. You have to assess each individual property, and that's done, at least in our county, at the township level. So you have those 3 administrators, and you have the board. There's a clerk who again, there's stuff that they do, but it's not much. It's more, filling in the blanks on the laws, keeping tracks of records, and that sort of thing. So you have, essentially 3 main administrators here, 3 main administrators here, overseeing what is, relatively speaking, a small piece of government. Now, the way it was structured back in the 1850s was based on how far a horse could go in a day. So it made sense back then to have right here and here. But in today, where I can get in my car
and drive through every township in an hour.
Yeah, it made sense to me that we could be able to take these 2, consolidate them into one, have one leadership structure. Again, from a taxpayer perspective, big dollars, no. But if we can't do it there, we're going to be able to do it elsewhere.
So that argument, the pushback was, and for people listening, the premise of what we're talking about is saving taxpayers money and making government more efficient for the people that government is represented.
Right.
Your point was, the pushback was, all the same roads still need to be plowed, all the same ditches still need to be mowed, all the same cemeteries need to be maintained, etc. Right. And you were like, yeah, but we can have one manager that gets paid 6 figures instead of 18 or 2 or whatever it was.
If you cut that in half. So it met with a lot of resistance. The resistance came from a lot of the township elected officials. They're very organized and very motivated. And I understand that. I mean, this even though you run for it in 4-year cycles, if that's your full-time job, you want to protect that.
And there were people, and there are people, and we don't want to make this whole podcast about townships, but there was a lot of people that, and that's and not just here, that becomes family lineage.
Yeah.
Your grandpa was the township guy, your dad was the township guy, now you're the township guy. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing if the guys are doing good jobs or the gals are doing good jobs.
No, and in retrospect, if I could jump on the DeLorean and go back to myself back in 2015 when this was brought to me, I would tell myself don't do it. Because, not because it wasn't a good cause, it was because the people that were pushing behind it that came to me, it wasn't organized. I ended up being up on a the front and center guy on the pedestal, and I didn't have many people behind me.
You.
So
you were actually more. I saw you more as one of those carnival girls up on the spinning boards having hatchets and throwing knives.
I mean, that's how it was.
That's what it looked like to me.
That's
man.
what it was. It was brutal,
Yeah.
and I'll be honest with you. I had that took place in 2015. In 2016, I lost my dad, and that was a 6-month ordeal.
I remember that now that you say that.
Yeah, we came up to my position as a township trustee being up in 2017, and I ran a race with a bunch of good people. 6 of us were on the ballot, and 3 of us won. But my heart was not in it, and frankly, mentally it was difficult. I was still trying to deal with my dad passing. The trust or the Township Consolidation initiative had taken a lot out of me, and I lost that race in 2017. And I said I'm done. My wife said you're done, and then I agreed with her. So I stepped away. I had been a precinct committeeman. I had been involved in helping candidates.
And for people that don't understand what a precinct committeeman is,
precinct committeeman is within both parties. They have folks that are essentially in charge of a precinct, which in a lot of cases is a neighborhood. So their responsibility is...
like in our county, there's hundreds of precincts.
There's hundreds of precincts. Right now, we're at a deficit of precinct committeemen. The numbers over the years have gone down because political participation has gone down. But those people are supposed to be the outreach for the party. So you have a primary election, the precinct committeemen get elected, the party leadership gets elected, and you have your candidates that get nominated. So the intent is for the precinct committeemen and the party to be out helping the candidates in their party get elected.
Don't you think party politics has kind of run its course in our republic? By run its course, I mean just as the township was created for a time that existed, like the way, like the whole dissemination of information from this hierarchy of national level,
Right.
You know, like Bull Moose Party or the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the Federalists. It was, okay, we're going to sit in this room and me and you and Drew are going to put the plan together, and then we give it out to the lieutenants, and the lieutenants pass it out to the people below. And now we don't have to have that. We've got this, like now, the fact that we can communicate with folks, you have a completely different form of communication.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument. It's funny because this ties in nicely to something that happened to me in the past 24 hours. I was out working with a couple other candidates, and we were just simply hanging literature on doors, trying to get the word out. We're obviously in a cycle that's going to be stranger because we have mail-in ballots that are going to start to go out on September 24th, so just over a month from now. So we're out hanging bags on doors. I pop on a Facebook page that I joined that was created in the wake of the George Floyd killing. It's a diversity group in my local municipality. And someone there who's been a Democrat activist for years that I've never met. I don't know him, but he's a Democrat, I'm a Republican. So apparently we hung something on his door, and he posted a paragraph screed about, the old white Republicans who, it was a paragraph of degradation because he filled in what he believes that we believe. And the irony of it is, as I was reading his post, which was, it was a word salad of just put downs. And I'm a big boy, I can handle it. I kind of move past it. But to the right of his post, I'm reading the purpose of the page, which it's a progressive page.
To spread love and peace and community.
Yeah, having understanding of people with different
I knew
opinions.
what you were going to say without even saying it.
And I took a screenshot of it, and I'm like, do I even want to wade into the water?
No.
Because part of me wants to, not in a combative way, but part of me wants to is like, you don't know me, how can you hate me? Because there is a lot of that in the political sphere right now.
I think that's everywhere. You go on Facebook, yes. I mean, other than like gardening or, home decor.
But even that stuff is not.
It can be very divisive, but that's human nature. When people say things like, when we were kids, or we need to get back to how we were, I chuckle. I remember I was on a road trip with my kids a few years ago. We drove to Maine and back, and I like to kind of like read the research of where we're research where we're at.
Right.
And we stayed in the Adirondacks for a couple nights, and we read a lot of history there. Well, we're traveling through this area where certain Indian tribes were at, and I had not read a lot about that specific tribe, so we began reading about it, and we found a cool documentary. Anyway, this is like at the 1600, 1500 time frame. Mm-hmm. These two tribes, for centuries, their whole purpose was make babies. Babies would go to the other tribe and bludgeon heads in. Right. And then finally one day chiefs are like, hey, wait a second, all we're doing is like eating and caving each other's skulls in. There's like mass graves with just dozens of baby boys' heads caved in. Like, we've always been kind of like this.
Yeah.
Now we don't bludgeon each other's heads or steal each other's women. We go online and go, you're a bad person.
Which is good, but there's a corner of me, because I have kids, I'm worried that we're starting to edge back towards that.
Dude, I totally agree. I just said to somebody the other day, somebody shared something with me, and the first thing I thought of is like gladiators, man. We're like coming back to like the days of the gladiators. Like what they sent me was so violent, not fake.
Yeah.
And the comments were like so dismissive of how horrible the thing was you were watching.
Yeah.
And like, where do I get more of this to watch? And it's like, all right, we're just going to be like, the Caesar pretty soon, where we've got people tearing lions apart and getting eaten.
I was flipping through Facebook or Twitter or something last night, and somebody's doing a live feed from Racine, which there was a police shooting of a black man yesterday, which everything's a 20-second video, and it's hard to see.
So in Racine, Wisconsin, yesterday, law enforcement.
Kenosha.
Kenosha. But in Kenosha, yesterday, law enforcement shot somebody, and that person was black, just so I understand what you're saying.
Okay. And so that ended up resulting in rioting in I guess, downtown Kenosha, where they lit municipal vehicles on fire. They burned about 20 cars at a used car lot. They tried to light the courthouse on fire, and I look at that, and I mean, I'm a pro law and order person. I think there are good cops, and there are certainly going to be bad cops. As long as you have cops, you're going to have people that are bad. I don't know in this particular situation. The video looks pretty bad, but a video is a video. It's
doesn't tell the totality of the situation.
No, and if they were wrong in what they did, the cops need to be fired. You can talk about if they need to be charged, but that's how you deal with things. Every time that these riots start in a reaction to something else, and we saw it in Chicago a couple weeks ago. Every time it happens, it gives legitimacy to people who
lashing out if you
have ill intent. Something happened that was bad. So our reaction to that is to go and do something bad to someone else.
I will add to that. You don't even know if the something bad was something that was wrong.
Right.
It could just. Some people need to be shot.
Yeah.
And some people do get shot because they asked for it.
Yeah.
If you were elected to the county board, what would you do as an elected official in the county board, especially in our county, doesn't have a lot of say-so in things like dealing with riots. We have an elected sheriff that oversees law enforcement and a state's attorney. But you're starting to broach where you now have a voice, like our county board chairman, of course, comments on anything he can to put himself into the
newspaper.
The newspaper or spotlight. And most people that read it don't understand that person literally has no jurisdiction, no legal authority for most of the things that they're talking about. But, and this is something we tell people often, somebody that's a county board member or a city council person is the next congressperson or state rep, and you know this better than anybody. What would you do with all this riots if your office so gave you?
I think that to a certain extent we don't have a lot of control of the sheriff's department. The sheriff does his job. I think that as leaders on the county board, we can make sure that that the sheriff's office is fully equipped, fully trained. The sheriff that we have here, who we both, I think, agree is a good person.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Has done a real good job. As a matter of fact, the Democrats on the board recently, you talk about trying to get headlines, tried to put together in the wake of the George Floyd killing and the protests that took place, and we had some of those in the county. They were not violent or anything of that sort. But in trying to, I think, draw attention, it's more about drawing attention to themselves, in my opinion. They put together I think it was called it ended up being called a proclamation, but initially it was a resolution that they went down the road of trying to construct something that would correct the sheriff and to make sure that he's doing the right things. In the process of putting that resolution together, they found out that he was already doing the right things, but they felt it was necessary to put together a resolution saying, you're doing the right things, make sure you keep doing the right things. which
For those of you watching, Drew's behind the camera shaking his head too, because that's stupid.
Yeah, and so you end up with the county board, and this has happened multiple times on different issues over the past 3 or 4 months, is you have the county board talking about this issue, spending an hour or 2 hours or whatever it is, talking about something that it's a nothing burger. You're not accomplishing anything.
You say a nothing burger?
Yeah. So if the resolution...
I always call that a circle jerk.
Okay, well...
You can't use that term, but I can.
We'll see what happens November 4th or 15th or whenever the results finally come in. We'll come back and have a different conversation. But essentially, you have this discussion. So if you take it government in and of itself, and what is the biggest problem for people here locally? It's taxes. So when you ask, what can you do to reduce taxes? Let's get rid of the crap that they do, because
who's they?
Anyone that and right now it's the Democrats on our board. but it can be anyone that grandstands, brings forth an issue just for the sake of getting headlines or having something to campaign on in 2 or 4 years or whenever their term is up.
Isn't the problem really, though, that we have such a diverse society? What's important to you is not important to me. What's important to Drew isn't important to Bob down the street.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, our county has one of the largest holdings of conservation land of
Yes.
any county in the United States, which
Yeah.
is really interesting. You would think that would be in Washington or Montana
Right.
or something like that, but nope, it's McHenry County, Illinois.
Yeah.
We have thousands and thousands and thousands of conservation acres, which requires a conservation district, a conservation police department, and all those things. And it's, how many, do you know what their budget is? It's millions and millions and millions of dollars.
It's probably tens of millions if my memory
I think,
serves.
I think it's even more than that.
Yeah.
And people look at that and they say, okay, well, for me or you, maybe we spend $300 or $400 a year out of our local tax bill. I don't know what the number is. I should.
Yeah.
Would you trade $300 or $400 to have, like, near my house here is 800 acres of grassland and prairie that's beautiful? Would I be willing to see that become an industrial park?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that people here in the 80s and 90s that were in your position on the board said, hey, let's create this thing.
But that was something effective. They were doing something.
But my point is that there's still to this day plenty of people that say, I don't care about this. I grew up in the city.
Yeah.
It's plenty open out here.
Yeah.
Let it become
Yeah.
a more industrialized or commercialized area.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that we're going to have to take a look at in the county as we go forward is how we look at business and commerce. Historically, a lot of people that work, 9-to-5 jobs have to either drive out of the county or get on the train and go into the city.
Okay.
We're dealing with an economic situation right now that I don't think most people have processed how difficult things are going to be.
You're talking about with COVID.
With COVID, the shutdowns, the impact that's had on business. I don't think we fully wrapped our heads around it.
Yeah, I agree. Just read an article last night that we've had more bankruptcies of billion-dollar companies than any. I think 2009 was the most that ever happened.
Yeah.
And we've surpassed that number.
I mean, I work. My full-time day job is I work with major corporate clients, and a lot of them are. Everyone's working from home for the most part. There are some states where offices have opened back up, but the number of people that are actually willingly going in there is very small. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see a crash in the commercial real estate market. Companies, I think, are going to find that people can work from home effectively, which is a good thing, but they might also find that they can do more with less permanently because a lot of companies have gone through layoffs and they're not going to be able to bring people back because commerce is going to be is drying up right now. So the question that we're going to have to deal with in the county, and some of this goes into the municipal governments, and there's different outlines and pieces that the county has oversight of versus the municipalities, but our approach and acceptance level has always been that people get in their cars and drive out of the county to go to work or take the train and go into the city. We need to kind of take a look at that and say, does that make sense? Are there parts of the county that we can open up to industrial growth? And I think I'm a conservative, which means I like to go slow. I want to make sure that I understand the implications of whatever is before we move forward. But we recently, for the first time in history, we have an expressway that has a on or off ramp into the county down in Marengo. Mm-hmm. So what can we do down there and I'm not, for the people in Marengo, I'm not planning some grand invasion, but is there an opportunity there to create factory space, office space?
Well, the people of Marengo, when they lobbied to have that put in, want the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So then it becomes incumbent upon leadership or the leadership that is in office to take a look at the course that we've been on and say, does that make sense, or can we alter a little bit this way?
Is it really government's job to even think about these things? Is it not? I look at, when I listen to campaigns for Congress, state level government, president, of course, and people talk about job growth. And first thing I think about is none of your business.
Right.
I mean, it is none of the business of, and people listening might be like, well, of course it is.
Yeah.
There's no statutory duty for a state representative or a congressperson or a senator or a president to find anybody a job.
Right.
Or create jobs. I mean, that's
I'm not looking at it from a I'm going to go out and create jobs.
I know you're not. I'm just.
I know. No, but it's a fair question.
Yeah.
I don't want to answer it. But what we can do as elected officials, if someone comes to us, I mean, on the county board, we have oversight into zoning within the county non-municipal areas. So any municipality that's not incorporated, we make the decisions on. So if someone comes to with an idea for a factory or an office building, there needs to be
Or a gun range.
Willingness to acceptance, and there's going to be one opening up in Marengo, which
D5.
which is good.
Yep. D5.
Yeah, so that's the way that I look at it, and I agree with you to a certain extent. Government should be out of that; shouldn't necessarily have to drag it in. And when government drags it in, we see a lot of cases, especially at the federal level, where they throw out incentives. It's just throwing out money to people that have the right corporate structure that they can take that money, and what they do with it then becomes up to them.
You mentioned something earlier about cutting out the garbage that's waste. I mean, our government has now become one of the largest employers of people in the world.
Yeah.
And in a sense, so it's like, well, it's always been this way. We've got from the FBI and the ATF and the DEA all the way over to agriculture and medicine. And of course, there's a much good that comes from all of that. But what would the world look like if government was not in every... I mean, there's nothing in this space that we're in, from the cameras to the lights to the tabletop to the polyurethane that's on here, that somehow government did not touch.
Yeah.
Your clothing, your eye contacts,
Yeah.
Government touched all of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of duplication, so you have to first ask what should they be doing and who should be doing it. I went through about 10 years ago, I started up a 501(c) nonprofit, and I did it myself. I got a couple books from legal organizations that, page by page, walk you through the entire process, and I did it. But it took a lot. Now, I could have hired a lawyer, but should I have to hire a lawyer to do that? I'm talking to farmers that operate land within the county, and they're telling me about the processes they have to go through with regards to drainage and stormwater. There are layers that they're definitively frustrated with. Like they go through, if they want to make a change or whatever, they have to go through with the Army Corps of Engineers to get an approval. That's not good enough. Now they have to go to the county and get the same level of approval. And the county won't look at it, and I might be mixing this up, but the county won't look at it until the Army Corps of Engineers does their thing, and then it sits with the county. So
the interesting thing about that, and that's one of those things, you grew up in a farm community and it's like, leave us alone, let us tend our land. Well, for all of time, man did not have a way to change streams off of thousands of acres of lands and the way that water flows. I mean, over here's one of the last natural fens in the area with, I believe they're called Blanding's turtles, I believe. It's an endangered indigenous species of turtles. I think I'm saying it right.
I'm learning something.
Yeah, they're cool. But if farmers continue to do what they were doing, that area would be gone, because a fen is like a bog, except the water moves through it, right? And we don't think about, like ranchers out west, everything's about grazing land and water to feed the cattle, and you get so focused in on like what's important to you. So I'm just commenting from like the other perspective that it is a pain in the ass, but then that's government protecting the fen or
Right.
protecting you from the guy that's putting the concrete plant up next door to you that's going to coat your house in cars and dirt.
Right.
And
I don't think most government officials are experts on everything.
sure.
So one of the things that, we all hear in the news, everything is about Congress and Washington. In Illinois, we hear about the state because the state is what the state is. But everyone assumes that because you have an R or a D next to your name, that automatically you think this or think that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, obviously if I'm Republican, I lean or have a particular bias.
What does Republican mean to you, Michael?
Republican means to me, I believe in local government. I mean, the Washington thing frustrates me. We're in a presidential race right now, and it frustrates me because it gets so much attention and there's so much noise around it that people don't pay attention to their local races. They're going to vote in November, but in Illinois, what happens in the spring. Elections for school boards, municipalities, townships, and while the turnout in the race in November is going to be, I don't know, 60, 80%, I don't know what the number is high. The turnout that if you get 20%
In the spring, yeah.
in the spring, that's going to be nothing short of a miracle. So we get all wrapped up in Washington and the hysterics that are so easily promoted out today via electronic media sources, social media, that people don't pay attention to what's happening locally. So as a Republican, we need to pay attention to what's going on in Washington, but there's a lot more that happens locally and even at the state level that impacts people than what they do in Washington.
So this begs the question of, whose fault is that? And of course it's the individual if they choose, we all choose what to pay attention to. So something we talk about often in this podcast, on our social media, is how do people, like when you and I met, there were various initiatives. You were supporting a candidate, we were supporting a candidate. We are clearly superior at campaigning because we won.
I just
I had to get one more dig.
I just endorsed. I was not involved in the campaign.
I know, I'm just kidding. All right. But my point was, people often look and they say, well, I can't do anything. That's for guys like Drew or Mike to do. They know what they're doing. And you, as well as I know, that's completely not the case. It's just who wants to carry some load and let's go. Comment on that. Go.
So this is something that I'm working through right now, and because of the lack of participation by people in politics, the candidates, as they should, are they're left on their own. There's not a lot of involvement by people locally. So what I would say to people is, if you're in Illinois, for example, and you're riled up about the presidential race, and the extent of what you're doing is sitting at a keyboard and reading articles and commenting on Facebook or sharing articles, you're not doing anything. You're not, generally speaking, you're not changing anybody's mind.
Yeah, usually those are all just vacuums.
Yeah, but if you don't know anything about local politics, and I'm trying to fight this battle of information. It's like, if all you're doing is sitting on the keyboard and you're frustrated, the thing that alleviates frustration for most people is action. So what kind of action can people take? And there's numerous resources where you can type in your address and find out who all of your elected officials are, who are the people that are on your ballot. If you're aligned with a particular party and you want to help Republicans, find the chair of your county party and say, hey, I've got some time, and I don't care if it's an hour a week, if it's you can go out on Saturday. There's so many small things that need to be done. Like right now, we're putting together literature assembly. So you got bags, you got candidate flyers, put them in the bag.
Literally, it's an assembly line of humans taking paper and stuffing it.
Yeah. And I'm not doing a good advertising. It's cumbersome. It's also
sometimes
fun,
it's fun though. You guys are
Yeah.
laughing and joking. You're listening to music. If the person
It's a
that's
good time.
running the campaign has a good vibe,
Yeah.
Drew's back there going, God no. It is a lot of work, but
Yeah.
that's like anything, like having a garden or splitting firewood or
Right.
running a marathon. The goal is to get the candidate to win because the candidate's going to go do good things for the community.
And the good thing about more people getting out and being involved in doing things is it's going to also help a better pool of candidates develop, people to run for office, because with the lack of participation, you also have a lack of quality candidates. One of the reasons I told you that I quit in 2017, I said no more. Someone called me in November of last year, October, November, and said, hey, we're having a hard time getting candidates to run. Would you consider doing it? And I had been out for two years, whatever it was. And I'd been doing improv comedy.
Yep.
And it was kind of at a lull, and I said, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be around it. Part of the reason, I had multiple reasons I got out of it. Part of it was the negative energy and what sort of exists as a cancel culture right now, where if you say the wrong thing, if I say the wrong thing here, or something that someone disagrees with, they can take a snippet.
You're just an idiot. Yeah. You're going to vote for this guy? He's a comedian.
Well,
look at me. I'm a clown.
Yeah.
Mike Shorten, the clown. Vote for
Yes.
Mike.
But
You couldn't help yourself.
No.
Keep going. Let's hear it.
so I said no, and I thought about it for a while, and I'm like, I've got I was a Boy Scout when I was younger, so I kind of have that obligation to some sort of service, and
Do your good deed. Good turn.
and I've got kids. We have for all the problems that we have or appear to have as a country, and I think appearance is a lot of it. There's a lot of great things about this country. We have a great county. I want to keep it a good place to be. And do we have problems that we need to fix? Yeah. Are some of those at the county level? Yeah. Are some of those a lot more of them outside of the county level? Yeah. But, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the original question, but I'll just keep meandering.
You're good.
But the point is that I got this call saying we can't find good candidates. And I know we have a county of 300,000 some odd people, and someone had to actively call me to get me to do it, which means no one was willing to step up. And that's bothersome to me. Because if and I know there's a lot of good people, if they're not willing to do it because whatever reason, maybe they don't want to campaign. They don't want to put themselves out in the spotlight. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. If we don't have the number of people that are smaller and smaller involved in supporting local candidates, you have fewer and fewer quality potential candidates. I think that one thing that a party could do is work to develop good candidates. So I'm out knocking on doors and talking to people. There are people that I've talked to that are very upset, very smart people, but they're very angry. Like one guy we talked to on Saturday, his name is Scott, and I hung the literature on the door and I walked down the stairs, and this guy comes charging out, and he's wearing shorts. He obviously works out a lot because he didn't have a shirt on, and was telegraphing that. But he was angry. He's like, it was me and one other Republican candidate. He launched on us. Like, why should I trust you guys? I normally vote Republican. And they started going down a litany of all of the levels of government that he has a problem with. And I sat there and I listened and nodded my head. And he mentioned school district and park district, and the park district seemed to be one that he had a big issue with. And he was loud and he was boisterous and very angry. But I said to him, right now, Scott, is a time that you could be circulating petitions to run for park district. And his, well, I couldn't do that. I'd be too loud. People wouldn't like me, blah, blah, blah. But if Scott, and we're going to try to get him involved in the local party. I mean, one of the skills that you have to have when you're an elected official, I think, is some sort of a level head. Mm-hmm. So he's really upset, and I don't know the guy. This is my first interaction with him. Maybe the rest of the time he's cool, but he gets fired up when he talks about park district. but maybe, we can work with Scott and say, hey, Scott, you have a lot of good ideas. Your thoughts are legitimate. How can we help you, learn how to articulate that and be a little more approachable? Like when I was a trustee in Nunda Township, part of that was a learning for me. And it took me all 4 years to get to the end of it to realize that my approach wasn't working. I thought that if you go into a meeting and bang on the table and yell, you're going to change people's minds. That wasn't it. But I learned it by myself. No one was really coaching me, but I have that experience now. So Scott said, okay, Park District, it's something I could do, but, you need to help me, like, how do I do this? Because there is some complexity to politics, and there's the complexity is getting elected is one piece. The other complexity is once you're in office.
Being effective.
Exactly.
Because we see that constantly. People go to the state, they go to federal government. Yay, we spent thousands of man hours and women hours and tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to go live in Springfield or Washington and not do anything because you're not a leader or not a good communicator or not effective. Or
I mean, if you go to, Springfield's a good example, because Republicans, I think, in the state house are in the super minority. It might be the same way in the Senate. If you go there and all you do is bang on the table and object to everything that's brought before you, and you live in such or exist in such a divisive atmosphere that you can't go to someone on the other side and advocate for something. I don't care what the issue is. I mean, maybe it's the FOID card. Okay, maybe we know that process is challenged.
Needs to be abolished.
Needs to be abolished.
Needs to be abolished.
Okay. But you're not going to be able to get it abolished in the state of Illinois because the Democrats have control and that sort of thing.
They also said we wouldn't pass Conceal carry.
Good point.
They said you won't get that done in the state of Illinois.
Okay, fair point.
Yeah.
But if you can't go to someone on the other side and talk about it, have a conversation. I mean, right now, if the news reports are true, a lot of people have been buying guns. I think somebody's been buying guns, and I got to
millions of people.
And I got to think some of those are Democrats. So
actually, we're contacted quite a bit these days for private training by liberal people that don't want family or friends or coworkers to know, and I'm not outing anybody.
Yeah.
Good people.
Sure.
They're just super concerned about what's happening in the world, and they know that government can't protect a lot of them in day-to-day situations.
Right. So you have a constituency that is changing. So that creates an opportunity for a Republican down in Springfield to go to a Democrat and say, hey, I know you don't want to eliminate the FOID card, but how do we make it easier or less expensive or less cumbersome? Again, it's another something, you think about the amount of time that we spend filling out paperwork for the government directly, filling out paperwork for companies that need the paperwork for the government.
I think the problem that a lot of lawmakers, and that is what they call themselves, I call them representatives. You're not there to make laws over me. You're there to represent me. They've forgotten that their job is to protect the citizen. The number one job of government is to protect the citizens. Yep. Create a blanket of military and a means of protecting the borders. Right. That's the number one thing. Not to tell us how to live and how to be and what to think and what to eat and what to stick into our bodies. And
I don't I don't care your race, your gender identity. I don't care what you do.
Me either, as long as you don't hurt people.
As long as you don't hurt people, and I guess as long as you don't hurt people and you want to be productive and live a good life, whatever that life looks like.
What if I don't want to be productive and I want to be a bum, but I don't want to hurt anybody? Is that okay with you? I mean, how can you make somebody?
Well, you can't. So I think that you have to create an atmosphere where people at least can feel somewhat motivated to do the right thing. Now, and that's a broad statement, I fully recognize, but you have parts of this country, I do I'm not plugging myself because no one watches it and I don't want anyone to watch it anyway, but I've done podcasts in the past.
You should plug it.
Okay, well, Shorty Show, I do a podcast it's either twice a month or twice every 6 months.
And what do you talk about?
I like to talk to people that about different things. So I've done different podcasts over the year. This latest one started right after COVID. I'm like, I want to do something. People were really upset and nervous. I just wanted to have conversation. It was therapeutic for me to a certain extent.
Cathartic to talk and hash your thoughts and ideas out.
Yeah. So the first couple that I did were about politics, and I just reached out on Facebook to anyone that was a Facebook friend of mine. I'm like, who wants to be a guest? And we'll just talk about whatever. And so I did one with a guy who's a libertarian. He's not involved in politics, but we just talked for, I don't know, an hour or so. I did one with our state senator, Craig Wilcox, talking about Governor Pritzker's reaction to the COVID, and it was about an hour or so. I did one that was really interesting about a month and a half ago. This was after the George Floyd protests and riots and everything that took place. I was scrolling through Facebook, and my former neighbor, who was the worship pastor at Willow Crystal Lake, he moved down to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he's now working at the Church of Battle Creek down there. He shared I guess it's called a Facebook note, but it was called a Black Man's Lament, and it was written by a black man, which would make sense given the title. But and it was his perspective on everything that was going on, and his perspective was a bit more balanced. You know, he referred to people, the images of white people bowing on their knees in front of black people. It's like, I don't want that. You know, I don't need you to do something to correct things. And so I read this, and I stayed away from going live with the show at all, because the whole thing for me was very difficult to watch. All the protests, all the rioting. I think what happened to George Floyd was awful. But I read this, I'm like, I want to talk to this dude. And so I contacted him on Facebook, and I said, would you be willing to come on? I don't know you. This could be a disaster, but let's talk about, what you wrote, and more specifically, I want to talk to you. So I got him on the line, and our first contact was 10 minutes before the show started, and I introduced him, and I ended up doing, I had to do like a 10-minute unload monologue, but from that point forward, it was he and I talking to each other, and once I got my little space out of the way, learning about this guy, and interesting. I think he's got to be close to, and I'm sorry, Carl, if I'm saying this wrong. He's got to be close to 60. I think he got started with kids later in life.
Okay.
He's married to a white woman. He grew up and went to school in the late 60s down in Houston, I believe. So he went through segregation. He had an aunt and uncle that were involved in Washington. I think his aunt was the president of the National NAACP back in the 60s or the 70s. Okay. But we talked for an hour and a half, and I don't know how I started. Sometimes I go down roads. I don't remember how I started there, but one of the things that we came back to is I know where I was going. It came back to the just talking about the inner city and specifically the problems that exist in the inner city, and the point that I brought to him and he agreed is it's not necessarily a black issue, it's a poverty issue. So you have people that are concentrated into these areas that live in poverty, and they see it over and over and over again. And you repeat what you see. And so, I don't want to say it was a conclusion, but one of the kind of my walkaways from that is that, we talk about a lot of what's going on as a black and white issue, and I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but it's also a broader poverty issue. So when you talk about people that want to be bums, I don't think a lot of people want to be bums. I think there's a certain small percentage that want to be, but there's a larger percentage that don't have the example put before them of how to be productive and be rewarded by work and accomplishment.
I agree to a point on that. I think I just actually had a conversation the other day about with a friend of mine that is studying for his doctorate. He's in education. Travels around the country teaching educators a very specific thing inside of school systems. He, as a young man, lived in an area that was lower middle class, and decided he wanted to be a concrete worker.
Yeah.
Because and this was his words, he said, because the wealthiest person he knew was a concrete guy. And there was a lot of alcoholism in that area,
Right.
a lot of, just destitute people scraping to get by. And so the most successful model he had was a guy that did concrete work, which is, I'm a carpenter, so I get that. You can earn a great living doing that. But then he ended up with an Ivy League scholarship because of his grades and his athletic abilities.
Yeah.
And when he and his father went to look at this school, his dad's like, let's get out of here. These people are a bunch of, uppity no-goods.
Right.
So they leave, and he goes to a lesser school, which was fine. But his point was he couldn't see himself. He could have been a doctor. He could have been a lawyer. He could have been a scientist.
Yeah.
And now he's getting his doctorate in his
Right.
40s, but he literally couldn't see himself as anything beyond a concrete guy. And it's not demeaning, because to me, trades people are the hardest working folks I know, and I am one. But he couldn't see himself in a spaceship or in an airplane or in an operating room. He just couldn't even picture it because of the model that's in front of him. But that begs a bigger question: is that government's responsibility or mom's and dad's?
No, I don't think it's government's responsibility. I think you set the table so that people that want to come to it and eat and be successful can. It's all about balance, okay? So you want to make sure that the people can compete fairly and I think we've gone way too far in terms of putting obstacles in people's way. Some of it is designed by the government, and I think some of it is designed by, we'll call them lobbyists.
I was going to say lobbyists. I know where you're going with this.
It becomes a protection.
Barriers to entry are so great that somebody that's got a great idea and maybe a little backing just can't get over the hump of all of the legal junk.
You talk about obstacles to success. If you want to be, pick a specific industry in Illinois, a lot of them you have to have years of apprenticeship before you can even get your own license and operate on your own. And some of the steps along the way might make sense, but as you read through the laws that exist, the barriers, some of them seem more to keep people away from doing something. You look at and this is going to be an obscure fact that I'm pretty sure is reliably correct. I
can search it.
Okay, good. But I was down in Springfield a couple years ago, and we were doing a tour of that old neighborhood. I don't know if you've ever been there, where I don't know if it's actually Lincoln's house that he was. Okay. So one of the things that they said on that tour was that I don't know what he was doing before, but at one point Lincoln decided he was going to be a lawyer.
Sure.
So back then, you grabbed
law books.
You said, I'm a lawyer.
Yeah, you study the law to end.
And you can't do that now.
I think there's one state left you can still just challenge the bar.
Yeah. Virginia, I think you can apprentice for a couple of years, and
I think there's still one you can just go challenge the bar.
You can. Okay.
I've asked different attorneys because I've thought about doing it.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, I worked with attorneys, and I'm not.
I'm smarter than most of those people.
I don't know about most of them, but I've worked with enough of them, and I'm like, you don't know that. I grasp it. But But you think about that. If you want to be an attorney in most areas of this country, you have to go get a 4-year degree. You have to go to law school for 3 years. And so you think about how much college costs and how much law schools cost, and those are barriers to entry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does it derive good results? In some cases, yes. But again, I've worked with different attorneys that have gone through that process and spent that money and met those bars or those obstacles to become a lawyer. And I don't know how they did it, because what I view as their skill is not perfected, and frankly, there are some points where I've had to deal with this as a township trustee, where I have a lawyer that's paid by the government tell me one thing. I walk at that meeting, I go back, and I start pulling through state statute, and I come back to the next meeting.
Your research was better than theirs.
Yeah. And they're getting paid $200 an hour.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not besmirching lawyers. There's a lot of good lawyers out
He's
there.
besmirching the heck out of lawyers. We've got a lot of good lawyer friends, and I use a lawyer joke every chance I can. At the very least, just calling them leeches and little suckers. We're getting long-winded. Let's switch gears a little bit before we hang it up.
Yep.
Comedy. Tell us something funny.
So yeah,
be funny now.
So I'm too.
laughing.
I love those. Yeah. Somebody hands your microphone. Here,
Yeah.
you just
Make us laugh.
I haven't done stand-up comedy. I did improv comedy,
Mm-hmm.
which is different than stand-up. So stand-up comedy, you go up with a microphone, you tell jokes, and make people laugh.
Well, I just flew in. Am I tired?
Yeah. Improv comedy is different. Improv comedy is you go on stage with a group of people, and you create scenes from scratch. So to a certain degree, like Second City.
Let's do one.
So have you done improv?
I mean, my sister was into it, so we play around a little bit, but I'm not professional like you. So how's it go? So,
Okay.
So you guys have some practice working together, and you got up on stage, and then is there like an MC, or does the audience just throw something out?
We kind of switch around different roles. So you have one person that'll introduce. They call them scenes, but they're called improv games. So you'll have a game that is, I'm trying to think of what, Slips is one. Slips is you take 2 or 3 of the actors, you put on outside the theater, and then the MC says to the audience, okay, I need some suggestions from you that are going to help us make up the scene. And so can someone throw out some movie lines for me? And you write down the movie lines on the slip. All right, how about some song lyrics? You write some song lyrics on the slip. And you take the slips. Let's say you have 3 actors out there. You have 9 or 12 suggestions. So you give each actor 4 slips and you call them back in. You hand them slips and you say, okay, we need a suggestion for a scene. Can you give me a place that is about the size of this stage? And someone will say,
Coffee shop. Go.
And the actors, at that point, you create your character and you start your interaction. And the rule on it is, the first rule of improv is yes and. So
What was that?
yes and.
Yes and.
So I come out on the stage, you and I, neither one of us know who's going to talk first. So if I come up and I say, hey, Jimbo, it's been a while. How's the elbow?
Elbows killing me.
Actually, I just broke a rule.
Oh.
You're not supposed to ask questions.
Oh, no
I'm
questions.
I'm out of practice. I'm not on stage.
No questions.
No questions. Can't ask questions.
No questions.
Yeah.
Okay, hey Jimbo.
Yeah.
So you can't say how you doing.
Yeah. Can't say how you doing. Yeah. It's so you
Hair looks great.
Hair looks great. It's it's been a while. Last time, that's a question too. I'm so out of practice. So I say something. Just to be clear, I never ever got paid for it. He's
a lot better county board member than he is an improver.
Exactly.
But you had fun doing it.
It was fun.
So what I got out of it when you told me you were going to do that, and my family, most of them are in entertainment in some way. I thought, great, you were using it as a offload for all of that stuff you took on from years of having to be cooped up and stuffed up, and
it was something different.
Yeah,
and it allowed me to loosen up a little bit, gain some perspective. I I worked with both students and coaches who were a different group of people than I was used to. I was I was one of the oldest people that I was in. I took a number of classes, and then there were two different groups that I was a part of. But I was the oldest. A lot of young kids in their 20s, I guess what you call millennials right now. So, and a lot of people from different backgrounds that I normally wouldn't have interacted with.
That's cool.
So it was fun. It helped me grow as a person.
Get some fresh perspective
Yeah.
and some new slang.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, I did a podcast
What's
with a
up,
couple of
Boomer?
them. No, I did a podcast with two of them. It was called Shorty Money and Dunk. And it was me, 48, another guy, Steve, who was actually in his mid-40s, and then Mo, who was, she's a Pakistani, if she watches this and I get it wrong, I'll hear about it. Pakistani Muslim, in her 20s, and she was an interesting character, a good person. But we did a series of podcasts, and the original intent was to try and do something light and fluffy, and it ended up being more topic-based. But one of the first shows we did was talking about slang between millennials. You know, like she would bring words to us, and we would try and figure out
What they meant.
like slide me into your DMs, and I'm like, it actually ended up being pretty funny because we had fun with it.
I don't think my wife's going to let me do that.
Yeah, no. So, but yeah, you learn a lot, and that's what I was saying earlier about the person that posted about me and the other guys in the bag of literature that got hung on the door. The assumption is we're old white guys, we're Republican, so we must be evil.
You want to dump chemicals into streams so that
Yeah.
companies can make a bunch of money, capitalist pigs, and you don't care
Yeah.
who gets hurt in the process.
Yeah, and the fact is, he doesn't know me. I'm willing to talk to anybody. If you're a Democrat or a liberal or whatever label you have on, if you want to talk to me about why I'm running or what my values are or what have you, I encourage you. That's my camera right there. I'm going to encourage you. Reach out to me. Let's sit down. Let's have a conversation. If you're willing to sit down and have a cup of coffee, I'm willing to do it. If you want to talk on the phone, that's cool. Video calls. I may be 48, but I know how the phone works. I'm happy to share with you my views, and I want to hear your views because I don't know everything.
So if there's somebody watching that's got an interest, because one of the things you were really good at was motivating people and helping people. I shouldn't say were good at, but the thing that I noticed about you is you were really good at creating a framework for people. You and I rebuilt a bunch of the political parties'
Right.
infrastructure here, website,
Mhm.
logo, everything, and created a framework people could work inside of.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're still doing it, but you were great at that. And maybe people could reach out to you and look for some knowledge, support, ideas.
Yeah, I mean, anyone, I don't care if you're local or across the country. If
How do they find you?
you can find me on Facebook, Vote Shorty. It's a longer name, but that's my page. Mike Shorten is my direct.
Spell it.
MikeShorten. Website, Mike Shorten, MikeShorten.org. 815-973-9772.
Oh, cell phones.
Well, it's a virtual number, but it'll get to me. It rings
And I
the
think
phone.
you said that you're willing to offer somebody $1,800 to tattoo your campaign logo on their chest.
I don't recall ever saying that. No. If someone wants to donate $1,800 for me to campaign or tattoo my campaign logo on their chest or on my chest, I won't take that. I don't want that either.
Hey, everybody that comes in signs the CarryTrainer.
Sure.
Yeah, sign it somewhere and put today's date on it. Write Shorty on there too after, in parentheses. It's an interesting little signature there.
What's the date today?
Today is, I'm not going to say it aloud, but it's the, there's a reason we didn't say it aloud. Guys, we appreciate you tuning in today. This podcast was brought to you by our good friends at Armored Coffee. This is our S12 Challenging Blend. All in, be all in. And of course, Gunfighter Gun Oil, the world's best lube, keeping it wet, and our friend Mike Shorten. I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're going to see some good things come from you. Parting words on you.
Parting words on me. If you live in McHenry County, I'm running for County Board in District 3, which is the bulk of all of Nunda Township, and I have a couple precincts in McHenry and Algonquin. If you're not sure where you live, again, reach out to me directly and I'll help you find out where that is. If you want to help me on my campaign locally, reach out. If you're willing to help the Republican Party and other Republican candidates, reach out to me and I'll get you connected up. If you don't live in my district or my county, get active. If you're not active now, find local candidates, find your local party. I don't care what affiliation you're with. The local candidates need your help. And if we don't have people helping them, you might have someone that you agree with that you don't know, and they might lose a race because you're not there able to help, even if it's an hour a week. If you're not able or comfortable going out, given the pandemic that's going on right now, and you have $10 you can donate to a local candidate, $10 goes a long way. It's all about voter contact, and some of that's through mailers, social media, what have you. So that would be my encouragement to people, both in the county and outside of McHenry County.
I dig it. If you guys enjoyed this podcast, share it on social media, tell your friends about it. Mickey with a Higher Line Podcast, Drew behind the cameras and at the editing desk. Be well, don't be dickheads. Tell somebody you love them. Visit our website, CarryTrainer.com, for information about classes held throughout the U.S., CarryTrainer apparel, and upcoming projects. You can also email us at training@CarryTrainer.com for information about setting up your own private course or speaking engagement. Training@CarryTrainer.com or CarryTrainer.com.